In the early hours of a cold February night in 2026, explosions ripped through the heart of Tehran. Within minutes, rumors spread across the globe. By sunrise, one of the most powerful men in the Middle East was gone. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was dead, and the balance of power in the region would never be the same.
For years, Ali Khamenei stood at the center of Iran's political universe. His authority shaped military strategy, foreign policy, and the delicate balance of power inside a nation that had long defined itself through resistance and survival. But power, especially in a region filled with rival interests, always carries enemies you can see and enemies you cannot. The airstrikes that killed him did not happen randomly. Intelligence reports later suggested months of planning, surveillance, and strategic positioning between global powers competing for dominance in the Middle East. For the United States and Israel, the operation was described as a precision strike targeting Iran's highest command structure. For Iran, it was an act of war, a direct attack not just on a leader, but on the symbolic heart of the revolution itself. Inside Tehran that morning, chaos spread quietly at first. People gathered around television screens in silence. State media spoke carefully, slowly confirming details, one announcement at a time. No dramatic music, no celebration of victory, just cold, official language describing a national tragedy. Because everyone understood what this moment meant. When a leader like Khamenei falls, it is not only about one man. It is about succession struggles, military command control, regional alliances, and the future of nuclear negotiations that had already pushed global diplomacy to its breaking point. And somewhere behind closed doors, Iran's political elite began preparing for what comes after death in a system built around survival of ideology rather than individuals. But history has shown that when powerful leaders disappear suddenly, the vacuum they leave behind can be more dangerous than the conflict that removed them. No one knew it yet, but this was only the beginning.
In Tehran's political system, power does not simply pass like a ceremonial crown. It moves through complex layers of religious authority, military influence, and revolutionary loyalty built over decades of political struggle. And when Khamenei died, every one of those layers began to shift at once. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard, long considered one of the most powerful military forces in the region, moved quickly to secure strategic locations across the capital. Airports were monitored, communication channels were restricted, and inside government buildings, senior officials held emergency meetings behind closed doors, deciding who would speak to the world and what they would not say. Because outside Iran, global reactions were already escalating. In Washington, military advisors reviewed satellite intelligence and prepared defensive protocols for American bases across the Middle East. In Jerusalem, security forces increased readiness levels, anticipating potential retaliatory missile launches. Diplomats understood something terrifying, that Khamenei's death might not end the conflict, it could expand it. For decades, Iran had built its regional influence through alliances with proxy groups and strategic military partnerships across the Middle East. Now, those networks were waiting for instructions, waiting to see who would lead Iran next, waiting to see how aggressively Tehran would respond. And inside Iran itself, ordinary citizens faced mixed emotions. Some mourned the loss of a leader who represented stability and resistance against foreign pressure. Others saw an opportunity for political reform, hoping that a new generation of leadership might change Iran's future direction. But history teaches that transitions of power during wartime rarely bring peace immediately. Instead, they often bring uncertainty, fear, and sometimes revenge. Because in geopolitics, death does not always end a war. Sometimes it just changes who is fighting it. And in the shadow of those airstrikes, Iran was already preparing its answer. But the world was about to learn that leadership in Iran was only part of a much larger and more dangerous equation. The real question was not whether Iran would respond. The real question was how. Military analysts knew Iran had spent decades developing asymmetric warfare strategies, methods designed not to win conventional battles, but to make enemies pay a high price for every action they took. Missile networks, cyber warfare units, and regional allied forces were all potential tools of retaliation. Across the country, funeral preparations turned into something larger than mourning. They became demonstrations of national unity. Crowds gathered in city streets, waving flags, chanting slogans of resistance. In times of external pressure, history has shown that populations often rally around symbols of national identity. And for many Iranians, Khamenei had become exactly that, a symbol of defiance against Western influence. But inside military headquarters, strategy was replacing emotion. Iran's defense planners analyzed targets carefully, not just military targets, strategic economic targets, oil transportation routes, naval supply lines, and diplomatic pressure points that could destabilize global energy markets. Because in modern warfare, economic disruption can sometimes be as powerful as missiles. Meanwhile, global markets began reacting almost immediately. Oil prices rose sharply as investors feared instability across the Persian Gulf. Shipping companies adjusted routes. Insurance costs for Middle Eastern trade surged overnight. The world economy, still fragile from years of geopolitical tension, was once again feeling the shockwaves of conflict. Yet beneath the military and economic calculations, something even more dangerous was unfolding. Leadership succession inside Iran was never simple. Different political factions competed for influence. Religious authorities wanted ideological continuity. Military leaders wanted security strength. Reformist groups hoped for diplomatic reopening with the world. Each faction understood that the next supreme leader would determine Iran's direction for decades. And while the world watched for Iran's military response, inside Tehran, a different battle was beginning, one fought through politics, influence, and loyalty rather than weapons. Because in Iran's history, revolutions had not only been fought on battlefields, they had been fought inside offices, mosques, and closed council chambers where decisions about the future were made in absolute silence. And somewhere beyond the public mourning and global tension, Iran was preparing for its next chapter, even as the world wondered if that chapter would be written in peace or in more blood.
In the days that followed, the world waited for Iran's next move. But sometimes the most powerful responses are not the loudest ones. Sometimes they are the most calculated. Iran's leadership transition began to take shape behind closed doors. Political veterans debated succession strategies. Religious authorities weighed ideological legitimacy. Military commanders considered regional threats, and intelligence agencies monitored every movement along Iran's borders, knowing that weakness in moments like this could invite further attacks. For the people of Iran, life continued under the shadow of uncertainty. Shops stayed open, children went to school, markets filled with the sounds of daily life, because even during political crises, ordinary life must go on. History has shown that nations survive not just through leaders, but through the resilience of their people. Internationally, diplomatic channels quietly reopened.
Some nations pushed for de-escalation, fearing that full-scale war between nuclear-armed powers could destabilize the entire global order. Others prepared for the possibility that Khamenei's death might ignite long-term conflict across the Middle East. But history rarely moves in straight lines. Sometimes one man's death can change decades of geopolitical strategy. Sometimes it can accelerate conflicts that were already inevitable. And sometimes it can create opportunities for new diplomacy, new leadership, and new possibilities that once seemed impossible. In Tehran, the mourning period would last 40 days. 40 days of reflection, 40 days of political maneuvering, 40 days during which the future of Iran, and perhaps the region, would quietly be decided. Because power in the modern world is never truly about one leader. It is about systems, alliances, ideologies, and the endless struggle between war and peace. And as the world watched, one truth remained clear. The death of a leader does not end history. It simply turns the page to a new and more uncertain chapter.